off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Carrie, there's been nothing added to the agenda that we were...
Correct. There has nothing has been added, and frankly, based on the Secretary of State's advice, we probably won't be adding too many things.
No, I know, I was there at the meeting.
I know, so I'm just
yeah.
reiterating that you're not necessarily...
So basically, what the Secretary of State told us is that if there's anything added to the agenda at the meeting, it's for informational purposes only.
Yeah.
And we can't vote on it, we can't make any decisions on it until the following meeting. It has to become part of the agenda for public awareness.
Right.
So that's
Right.
it in a nutshell.
Yep.
That makes sense.
It does make sense. And he gave some, for instances, why he did it, and I won't repeat them.
Well, the reason he does that is because he's found some towns not doing it.
Well, yeah, what he said is there's some items that come up like that last minute if you've got a minimum public attendance.
Yeah, they
Because
pull it
there's
up.
just some tough issues that they don't want to talk about in front of the public, and
Yeah.
they kind of slide them in when nobody's there, and they vote on them and pass them without giving the public the opportunity to talk about it.
That's too
So-
bad.
Well, it has to do with the warning. You have to have.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, you got to warn everything,
Is
anything.
it
that
10
you-
days, 10-day warning?
It's not quite 10.
10, but it's a week or
You
so.
have to give the public notice you're going to
Right,
vote.
and so then you post your agenda,
Mm-hmm.
so if you change the agenda, then you're outside the warning period.
Got to be posted
Resets.
48 hours prior to the meeting.
Yeah, I think the
So-
10-day thing is for town meeting day, but this one is a little bit less.
So that's that.
Okay?
So, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda that we have in front of us. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Okay, so we get right into the work session.
Yeah, that's it.
And the first thing on the item on the agenda is stormwater management plan. And you're up.
Yeah,
Thank
so we
you.
hadn't met for a while, and I thought since we were starting to make some progress, it'd be good for Ned to go over where we've been recently and where we want to go.
You're smiling. I hope it's good.
It's good.
It is good.
To start off with, we want to get in the whole global thing of stormwater. I got to come up with a better pun that starts off like with a thunder shower or rain cloud or something. Get the state and the feds to pay for it, get the private owners to pay for it, and then finally us, whether it's off the regular tax rate or over a stormwater utility. But we got 4 projects going on right now. We got a design contract going out soon for the big pond at NMC to do just the engineering, not the actual construction for it. They're a little overwhelmed at this point, so we didn't want to go to construction too soon without getting them to ride along. We also have a renovation and rehab of the Hook.
Let's back up to the first one.
Sure.
The first one is at the...
And the big pond at NMC.
Okay.
They have one, but what we're needing to do is expand it to accommodate water from Eastview, Hill Farm, water that crosses from under the French
Yeah.
Hill, that area.
Is that the one that... Okay.
It's got a big pile of dirt next to it, and
Yeah,
it sort of has a 4-foot-tall
I'm with you now.
railing all the
Right in
way
front.
around it.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay. The one at
Excuse me.
Hook, I can't think of it. Hawk's Nest, thank you. Hawk's Nest is a small pond down in back there, and then the pond that's basically between the park and ride lot and Franklin Home Out. Those two, we have money to pay for it. We got money from the state. Actually, let me back up, way back. Back last January, Beth Pierce, the treasurer, came out with a thing that it would cost, or that she found the $50 million to do stormwater and lake improvement. They put together some stuff. They finally got around to, through the legislature and all the other phases, to putting together a grant program. So in the July dates, excuse me, Kerry and I spoke, and we put together 4, and at the last minute, without Kerry's knowledge, I said, just what the hell? I'll throw in a couple extras. We got some money. What the hell? And, because I was getting pressure from the state to say, apply, and I thought, you're wasting my thinking. You're wasting my time. We're going to get 1, because literally, I thought every other community was doing the same thing we are, is we got 20 years worth of, millions of dollars of projects to renovate and do. You're damn straight I'm going to apply for this money, because it was 50-50 match, so 50 cents on the dollar to get these things done. Well, that's a good deal. And the way they had it structured, you could make it a little bit even better than that. So throw them out there thinking, if we get 1, great. Well, we got 4 out of 6.
Wow.
And so we're going to do the NMC pond, the design and the engineering at 50-50 match, Hawk's Nest, Franklin Home Health, and also Tanglewood is another big one.
Right.
In all cases, we're going to have to develop some boilerplate, but we're also going to have to individualize this. A shared funding responsibility, get the 50% from the state and the feds. The other 50% is going to come from, let's just say, the town. I'm not saying our municipal budget, at least not at this point. We're going to try to negotiate with whoever the owner of the project is. In Tanglewood's case, it's a homeowners association. NMC, it's straightforward. It's the hospital. Hawk's Nest and Franklin Home Health, who actually owns their properties, a little bit up in the air, so we need to figure out exactly who it is. But we're going to negotiate MOUs with each one of those projects or sites so that we, the community, has the overall future responsibility for keeping an eye on the project, keeping an eye on the future maintenance of these things. And the future maintenance is going to be basically weed whacking once or twice a year, some basic stuff. The more structural, like 20-year, 30-year rehabs, we're going to obviously go back out for grants, because some of these are going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But for the ongoing maintenance, we'll do town forces, just so we keep, I want to say, not ownership of the property, but ownership of the project, just so if something starts to go bad, we can see, one of our people are up there looking at saying, hey, someone's screwing around with this, or hey, this has gone bad, or something else has gone wrong. Back to the global thing of stormwater, so we got 20 years to get this all done. And we got about $5 million worth of projects, give or take a bit, to get done. So we need to think about, at this point, that basically ends up being $250,000 a year. Now that's the minimum to get these all done over time. Obviously, we're going to go after grants and state funding and federal funding and all sorts of things. So the utility is sort of the fallback measure. So we need to think of it that way. The whole stormwater thing and is, as it says at the top of the sheet, it's volume and velocity. We are not, all of our stormwater stuff for the town of St. Albans is only indirectly tied to phosphorus. The phosphorus that we are putting out into the lake, so to speak, is because we're eroding it off of a bank of a stream or a brook or the lake itself. It's not because it's coming off a parking lot. Now, I'm sure there's a chemist saying, oh yeah, there's some phosphorus. Yes, there's some negligible amount of phosphorus washing off the land. And everybody keeps talking about fertilizer. I haven't fertilized my lawn in probably 30 years. And I bet you basically nobody fertilizes except for some handful of homeowners. So most of what's being put into the lake, at least from our streams, is because of erosion from previously deposited phosphorus, wherever it is. Also, an additional problem that we're facing in St. Albans Bay is because the river is essentially northbound, the winds are northbound also, so anything that enters the lake from the south flows up and gets sort of captured in a sense by the bay. So if you were, say, we're a south-facing bay, If you're a north-facing bay like Shelburne, essentially sucking all the bad stuff out of your bay and chucking it someplace else. So if you look at I always forget the name of the bay in Plattsburgh, they have literally the same problem we do. The Missisquoi Bay has the same thing. Now, they're a little special case because they have the river and some other things going on, but...
Like Cumberland, I think it is.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. But it's going to be stormwater is going to be tough, but if we start dealing with it now, it'll be easier to deal with in the long run.
And so, so you submitted the stormwater management plan, or we did even before you got here, and he's
Correct.
been updating it every 6 months since, which is what we're getting to on the first bullet.
Yeah, every 6 months we put in a report on what we're doing. It is literally, we do the same thing almost every year, give or take some very basic stuff. So, but they just want to make sure that you're moving forward, that you're making some amount of progress, and that you're not, that they can look around the community and say, yeah, what they're saying to us is basically correct.
Well, I'm just trying to put the pieces together. So, and then about a year or so ago, in our stormwater management plan, we were required to do a study on each watershed that required us to do flow restoration plans, or FRPs. And those flow restoration plans are, they prioritized everything
They prioritized everything.
in the water, in that impaired
in
watershed.
terms of, well, they prioritize things, and in the whole scheme of things, both were recently approved by the state, so we're in the good for that. But the priority, I thought, was a little screwy. I thought it jumped around a little bit and sort of it prioritized it in terms of funding and the money. It didn't prioritize it in terms of starting upstream and slowly building downstream, because some of the projects were fairly far downstream, and I had visions of Hurricane Irene hitting upstream and washing down, and you've just done this project, but you haven't done something above it, and some wave of water slams into it and destroys what you've done. So
Well, back in the beginning, when we did our studies, that's exactly what they did. They put up flow monitors,
right,
okay, all the way downstream,
Did we get this?
primarily to find out who was the biggest contributor. I think
Right.
that was the bottom line.
We still have a rain gauge, but we have only one or two. We don't have them in every
Yeah.
stream right now.
And the other thing I wanted to ask, I'm sorry, just 1 minute. So we got grant money,
right,
okay? We want to go the 50-50 route,
correct.
50% with somebody, with the feds, and 50% with somebody else. What about maintenance?
Maintenance in the sort of annual or semi-annual maintenance is going to be weed whackers and some basic shovel work.
Well,
It'll be
I want to back you up a little bit. I've installed some of these, okay, and it isn't quite that easy,
Some are not. You're correct.
okay?
Here, I'll jump off into the weeds. We're going to do a sort of a 50-50-50 deal. Okay. The first 50 is sort of the feds in the state. The second 50 in the scheme of things is us as a community. The second 50 is whoever the property owner is, the actual original permit holder for that thing. That's the second two 50s will be carrying forward into the future for the maintenance, where the basic maintenance, aside from what you've said, is going to be like, let's call it $1,000, $2,000 a year, so it'll be relatively inexpensive. Some of them are going to be more than that, like,
Well, there's certain stuff that flows into these, okay?
yeah,
And to be effective, they have to be at a certain depth.
correct,
Okay, so the depth of the water, the depth of the ponds are checked yearly. Basically, they want them checked after every major storm,
right,
okay? After every major storm. And eventually, the ones that we put in, they had like a bay, and they had a 4-bay with an overflow that went into a filtering system that went downstream. You have to get in there with machinery, my friend,
oh, yeah,
to keep those at a certain depth in order for them. And the other thing is at that time, you weren't just building a pond and saying, there, we got it done. That pond had a permit that went with it, and they're annual permits,
right,
and they have to be inspected annually and pass state requirements.
right.
So it's more than just weed whacking
Oh.
around it.
Don't you have to dredge those too?
Yeah.
But yes, that's what I said, machinery, you gotta dredge them, to keep them at the
If you have
depth.
a high
that you need.
sediment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We're
but
doing
that's
that.
only if it needs it. That's
Yeah.
only if you have the high sediment.
yeah, and high sediment would mean something else has gone wrong
Upstream.
upstream.
Well, either upstream or a major storm. You got a 100-year storm.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna get that
You'll
type
get,
of sediment.
yeah.
Right.
But that's why we're all going to have for every individual location, and we got about 50 that we have to deal with over the 20 years, that we're going to have an MOU with the property owner and with the town to make sure that these things are all spelled out. And the eventualities of that, sort of the major stormwater is a high amount of damage. We're going to need to figure out a system so that the correct person gets charged the correct amount, and so that, let's just say, the local property owner has done something that we haven't noticed and it damages the pond. They should obviously be paying, as part of sort of any MOU, the majority of that problem.
Sorry, Al, go ahead.
Well, just thinking long-term, and you have your 100-year storm, I don't think it's wise to have spikes in your cost to the homeowner or homeowners association. We need to figure out a way to level out
Exactly.
that cost and save money in the bank, so when you have the 100-year storm,
Exactly.
we put
The cash
deposits.
And never say never. In the last 5 or 10 years,
Right.
we
We've had
probably
like-
had a couple of them.
Yeah, we've had like 5.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where the utility comes in,
Right.
is it, we'd be using the utility as that fund to take care of the emergencies, but also that fund that would build up in a bank account so that we could match stuff, but also do those big repairs. And all, just as a quick aside, all of our stormwater planning is built based on a 2-inch storm. Basically, that big rainstorm we had a couple of weeks ago was a little under 2 inches, but that's the level of storm we'd have. We'd have a 2-inch storm spread over a 24-hour period, and that's what they're planning on.
Right.
And that's a 1-year storm, so we will have one of those every year.
Yeah. So basically, what I was getting to is you can't take maintenance out of the equation because it's there and it's got to fit into it.
No, and
No.
we were doing that on the Stevens diversion structure now, we do a lot of the in-kind stuff, which is my segue into a lot of these grants Ned's talking about. It's also good news that some of our match is in kind.
Yeah, it's in kind.
So
Oh, wow.
we're not
Yeah.
necessarily talking
Wow.
about cash, we're talking about, yes, Ned spent some time working on the grants, and we're gonna do some in-kind stuff. The homeowners
Yeah.
association, or whatever representative's gonna pay some, so we're trying to do this with as little cash outflow
That's good
from
work.
the
We
town as possible.
How much money was put aside in this year's budget for stormwater? 120, something like that?
100, I think it was 100, and
Hundreds-
then 100 for stormwater projects, like matching funds, and then 20 was stormwater consultation.
Yeah.
So we could use that on engineering or.
Do you think we'll get anywhere near that this year with matching and
I'd say you would on consultation, you probably wouldn't on the rest.
I'm just thinking if we
You
should.
think?
We don't have
No.
to, we don't have to spend it if that's what
No,
you're getting at.
I'm just thinking because a lot of times when we run under a budget, we apply it.
So that's what I'm getting at. We don't have to do that because it's in the.
But can we create a fund and then have this board say that any part of those line items that's not spent goes to a stormwater management fund to be used on that,
I
so it
don't
doesn't
think we
just get
should
thrown
take the
back?
stormwater management fund as our own the taxpayer's responsibility.
Say-
Okay, so if you're talking about like a maintenance fund or something like that?
No, I'm saying if we need, like that money, we're not gonna spend all of it this year.
Oh.
So if we're, instead of just throwing it back at the budget to lower, we've got it worked in as a cost to taxpayers.
So
We should just segment it and do a different fund.
we already do that, and that's what we were going to do this year, which is
Yeah.
why it was moved from an admin budget to the DPW budget, because
So it can
Department
go
of
under
Public
reserves,
Works
yeah.
is the only department where you can actually pull money out and save it for Department of Public Works. You can't use it for the listing office or anything,
Right.
but you can use it for Department of Public Works expenses in the future. And we've done that in the past, like say 3 years ago, we put $30,000 in there. We never spent 30 on stormwater. So we put it into the DPW reserve fund to be used at a future time.
Got it.
This
Wouldn't it-
past
But
fiscal.
that's not money we're using on other projects for DPW though, was it?
No, just,
No,
No.
just stormwater.
It's still
Correct.
dedicated to stormwater,
Yeah.
although it's in that fund.
Correct.
So is there a limit to that, though, if let's say that the voters approve 100,000 of stormwater, in your budget, you don't use it, you put it over in a fund, and then the next year, you put in for another 100. I mean, is there a limit to that? I mean, is there an obligation to voters that they know what's, you know, that you're putting this aside, and you're building this amount, that because they may be only approving 100, but after a while, you've accumulated more money?
I think the other question you gotta ask yourselves too is how much is enough?
Well,
How much?
I'm
do you
just
put
trying
into it?
to.
So I don't
so
think that
voters
there's a
understand, don't get
limit.
Transparent.
go ahead.
No, that's right, go ahead.
Well-
Can't have three people talking, we'll never get anywhere.
No, go ahead. I'll
No, it's
I think
fine,
we're
I
having a
just,
good discussion.
well, I think it's great, but I mean, you both asked a question, so we can only
Well,
answer
I'm
one
trying to
at a
get
time.
the answer to my question was
Exactly.
that, you know, it's small amounts, okay, you know, you're setting aside, but when it gets to be large numbers,
Yeah.
and the voters begin to wonder what's going on in there, are they approving several $100,000 that are set aside without saying, this is the bigger picture, you know, we're not, right now, we're setting aside 100 because of some unknowns and getting ready, preparing. You know, we don't spend it, okay. But if you said, okay, I'm gonna do this every year and build up 500,000, you know, and then say, okay, we're gonna use it, we don't have to go to the voters because now we've built this up because we've said 100 and, you know, to get prepared, but we really have a project that's $500,000 that we're gonna do, but not
We
gonna
don't
go to
have,
the voters.
I don't think there's any legal requirement that prevents us from doing this. I think ethically, after a while, I think we'd have to look at our community and the tolerance and say, look, where are we going? We've been doing that, in essence, with our emergency reserve fund. You know, because if at the end of the year, we have enough in our general fund, we ask the taxpayers, will you approve that 100 to go to an emergency fund? We've done that now 4 times. At what point, at the select board level, we'll decide at budget time and then right before town meeting, do we want to do that again, or do we have enough?
See, I thought there was a problem if you just put aside money that's not earmarked. You know, you just say, okay, we're gonna establish a savings account, we're just gonna, you know, put money that's not earmarked. I thought that would be problematic.
That is earmarked, though.
It is, that is earmarked.
To what?
The money that, your stormwater funds that you don't spend go into the DPW
Right.
budget are in fact earmarked
Yeah, they're restricted.
For our project.
for
No.
stormwater projects.
For stormwater.
Right.
I'm just looking at it
That's what I'm
as,
saying.
Right, so
Right.
if I may speak,
Go ahead.
my feeling is what we need to do is to have, if you will, I think this is capital planning. What we need to do is have a long-range, 10-year capital plan of how we envision this to go and what we anticipate the financial costs are.
that's gonna be very.
That justifies, it. If you did a capital plan, then you say, okay, at the end, this is what we're intending
And
to
let's say we
do.
need $10 million. Once we get up to 10 million,
I'm
And
just saying,
that's-
that's what I'm saying, you have to justify setting aside, not just setting it aside in case something comes up.
Might
And that
have
leads
to.
into my question. The answer to my question is, how much is enough?
well, until we do a study of what all these requirements are,
Right.
I don't know how we know how much is how much.
Right.
I mean, they have a number, but they were just throwing out a number. I mean,
No,
the
they're- Go ahead, sorry.
5 million?
It's about 5 million, and actually the numbers are pretty good. They did a pretty good job. But you're right, some of the places, some of the less than 10,000 projects, they just made them all $10,000, and some of them are going to end up being cheap. And some of the bigger ones, they made like $250,000, and it's like, just no way it's going to cost that much.
Well, I guess that's what I was getting at. I think the 5 million is the worst case scenario, and so far we've been pleased when we try to do them ourselves that we can do them at 25 or 50% of the cost that they estimated,
So
so.
5 million is the total, and then there's a 50-50 split?
Possibly.
Currently, there is. Next
Right,
year, there
right.
hopefully will be again. But, and this article, again, that came through, I'll send it around if people want a copy, says that there's going to be essentially the same thing into the future at some unknown amount. But we do have, the studies are done, we do have the money, and we do have the plan. And we do have the list of projects to do. We can, do them as listed in the flow restoration plans, or like what I've done is figured out ones that are like, we'll do, since cheap bastard that I am, I always want to save on mobilization. Okay, we're going to mobilize in this neighborhood, then mobilize over here, then mobilize over there, and slowly move downstream.
And you looked at the most problematic ones. It
Yeah.
wasn't arbitrary. I mean, the people that are having these issues are having significant drainage issues. This isn't
Tell you
just
what.
us.
Yeah.
Exactly,
So-
right?
So what's the next step?
The,
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
In terms of the money issue, the 50/50, that's still not settled politically. In today's paper, Beth Pierce was arguing with the legislature over whether it should come out of the state's capital budget funds versus, I forget how she wanted to fund it. So that's one question. I don't know if the state can sustain a plan.
Yeah.
Secondly, given the Trump administration, I'm not so sure you're going to have the same money coming out of EPA. So I think we ought to plan the worst case. Set up the $5 million. If we start getting federal money, but that year we won't collect any to add to the fund. Leave that annually to the select board.
Is it 5 million or is it 2.5 million? So is it total 10 and ours
No,
is 5, or is it
it's-
total 5 and we're 2.5?
the total is 5. The projected total is 5. Okay. Spread over 20 years, so it's $250 a year.
Okay.
So if we get the 50/50 match, it'll be less. But just to make just to be safe, it'd be well worth collecting whatever the minimum amount is.
Well,
Say the 5
I
million.
think if you take a look at the state of the state right now financially,
Yeah.
I would totally agree with Al and go with the worst case scenario.
Oh, and that's the 250.
Yeah.
So, in that same line of thinking, and on the financial side of this, is that you've got to go two ways. You go to the voters, and you go to the homeowners.
Correct.
How do you convince the homeowners to agree to an MOU? Or how do you convince the taxpayers to fund it through a utility tax? How does that occur?
Okay. Let's just say the homeowners association that owns a project, and owns an existing permit, it hasn't been maintained, needs a reasonable amount of work. There's something that's called RDA, and it's basically, I forget what RDA stands for. It's
Residual Designation Authority.
but basically, either way, it's throwing them to the wolves at the state. It's
boring.
basically, you no longer are dealing with us. You're going to deal with the state and the feds, and
You don't have 20 years, you have 3 or something.
you have some,
Something like
yeah.
that, 2 or 3.
It's a very short period of time, and it would end up, if we declare somebody an RDA, it is all on their dime. It's all on their dime forever and ever
It's
and
a
ever.
stick, not the carrot.
Yeah, it's a. and it-
Supposedly
Okay,
a
but
big stick.
expand on that a little bit for me.
It just means that, to put it in an inappropriate way, they're screwed. They are in really deep trouble, because if they're an inexpensive project, like say under 10 grand, it may not be that bad. But imagine if it's over that, I can see the homeowners, just that association or that neighborhood or that area being in deep trouble, because then they have to.
How would they be in? Because we've already experienced this at one time, and I want to figure out how they would be in this deep doo-doo that you talk about. Because what happened is that with stormwater, that it became a cloud on the title. Okay,
Right.
So this is the power of the state. So, we're not going to let you transfer property, and so what happens is you don't let that property transfer, you get some serious problems. But the state waived that, and
Individually or generally?
statewide, in that it is no longer a cloud on the title, because you can't shut down right now. You can't stop transfer of homes. You can't, and so. If you're a homeowners association and you say, we want to do this project and your share is $250,000 or whatever, and homeowners associations are a group of homeowners who traditionally don't like to spend money, and you hard to explain to them that, boy, the sky will fall if you don't agree to this. How does the stick hit them with the state? In other words, it used to be, okay, you can't transfer your property, but that'll never happen. The state won't allow that to happen. So what they're saying is that, there's going to be all this trouble.
Right.
But if the property can transfer, which it can today, How does that affect, I
think
mean, because
it's-
I just
not
don't see the
easy
homeowners
anymore.
agreeing to
It's not.
spending all this money.
I don't see the homeowners, how can a homeowners association be hit with a big surprise when they know they have the pond?
Permit.
They know the pond has to be maintained, and that was part of the original agreement to build in that
Well,
area.
I think that they're
So how
okay with
could
the
it be-
maintenance. I'm thinking, if if an association has a retention pond or detention pond,
Well-
I think they, that's one thing, the maintenance. I mean, there's annual maintenance, annual reporting, all that, whether it's done or not. I think that, but if you said, okay, we're gonna do a major upgrade, and it's gonna be several $100,000, I'm just thinking that it's gonna be very difficult to get them to agree to that. Northwestern, maybe, because of their ability to pay, they would agree to it. But if you go into Hill Farm or even Tanglewood, you had that problem in Tanglewood where the two neighbors were on their own, nobody else wanted to help them.
Right.
And it was all their stormwater,
Right.
and nobody else on their own did. So you step in and say, we're going to rebuild the pond, it's going to be $100,000, you got to come up with your, 5 or 10 grand. How do you get them to agree to that? And
With, with the flow restoration plans, and this is a bit of an assumption, and I'm pretty sure the state is going to do this. Now that the flow plans are approved and created in this area or in a bunch already of the areas, projects that got an RDA rating would be back in that clouded title situation. That you would be, it wouldn't even be clouded title, you would be unsaleable. So that, they can,
I'm just
No.
wondering if that politically possible.
well, actually, let me put it to you a different way. Nobody in the state yet has RDA'd someone, and there's been a fair amount of arm twisting very quietly off the record in neighborhoods in the Burlington, basically, their area, and a couple other places. So that, once people find out how much it is, they scream and yell, they say, we're not going to pay it, then somebody quietly calls them and says, you understand, if we do this, we truly are throwing you to the wolves, and you're going to be paying the whole damn thing, not some portion of the thing, and that you will be under the gun forever, that you essentially are your own standalone stormwater thing inside of a whole bunch of other things. So nobody's gone through that process yet. I don't want to be the first down to go through that because I think it's going to be sort of ugly.
And it's not necessarily as separate as it once was. The situation that you described is entirely different now because we were declared as an impaired stormwater in 2012. We told the state we would work with them. We assumed some ownership for the stormwater that comes off of our town roads, which is integrated in almost all of these neighborhoods. So we have said we would participate and be good faith partners in the stormwater management plan. We said we would do that with the flow restoration plans. They were accepted. So now we are slowly, they're tightening the belt every year, and not that any of us like it, but it's starting to rub, but it's got like a backflow preventer on it. We're not gonna go back to 5 years ago where we go, well, we don't believe you.
No, I'm just saying
prove
is
it.
that when you say to homeowners that they, that the stick is you can't sell your home,
I understand.
that politically is
Well,
a tough sell.
which is why for instance, I think putting it into numbers would help. So that Tanglewood thing, first of all, they said it would be 250
Yeah,
or
it was like
something
a quarter
originally.
million.
Ned worked with our DPW. They looked at what we really needed to do. We looked at the plan that was created. They came up with a plan that at best is half that.
It's about half, give or take a little bit. It's but let's just say it's 150 just
All
by
right, so
just
that-
for
With
ease.
us working with them.
But right, so
That's
that's
us,
the cost
yeah.
of doing it. Then they applied for the grant, and then we applied for, hey, we can do some of it in kind, not all of it, because it's a pretty big job over there, because it was neglected for a while. And we're down to
We're down to like 2,000, 1,500 per household in Tanglewood. So it ended up to be like, let's call it 15 or 20 grand. And
so that's a bite you could maybe
and when they're
live
home-
with.
Right, you're in a distressed area
Yeah, but-
anyway, this distressed system. anyways.
Right, and you know,
But
that's
it was-
probably the worst case
But it was
scenario.
a small enough
Would have
number that,
association fees?
They do have an
Yeah.
active homeowners association,
Well, why,
absolutely.
you know, this is
Yeah.
what I have a hard time understanding, is that if it was developed, okay, and it has association fees, when you establish those fees, aren't you taking into consideration everything that, all the maintenance and everything that has to be performed to that location,
You'd be very,
at that location?
be very
And stormwater,
Well, this thing,
upgrade, not necessarily upgrades, but maintenance should have been part of those fees.
but the whole story, we don't have time to
Yes.
probably do it all, but Tanglewood is complicated in that,
I'm not saying Tanglewood,
Like,
I'm
as an
saying
example-
anyone.
But this has happened,
go ahead.
throughout the state. Certainly it happens in Colchester all the time.
Yeah.
It's, I'm glad Bill's not here because I'd get shot. Rain falls
Yeah,
on
he's
the,
only a phone call away because,
Put them on a conference call.
rain falls on the entire town.
yeah.
And my feeling is the entire town needs to deal with it. So to Sam's point, I think we ought to share those expenses for dealing with the rain universally. And that's why I like the utility. So it doesn't come back to one particular association, because a lot of that water is not falling on their land, it's coming through their land from other parcels of land. So why don't we look at it as a community problem and deal it as a community problem? And with setting aside money annually, I just think that we can manage this one for all and all for one.
I mean, that's all well and good, setting that money.
You're now talking as the utility plan,
Yes,
which is utility tax,
right.
to fund that.
That-
Everybody pays.
Yep.
That's all well and good, is, you know, we're experiencing some good times right now.
Right.
We've got money, but when the tough times roll around, and you're looking at tax increases and everything like that, property taxes, that's gonna be a bitter pill to swallow.
But so is it for the individual homeowner. We're all, the inflation or economic problems face not just the town, it's the homeowner. So we're sort of tied together on terms,
To me, that's the same thing as trying to come up with an agreement for water and sewer.
It
Some
is.
people will say, you know, why do I want to pay for it? I can't use it,
except
or I don't get any benefit from it.
Well, it's a
that's
balancing
a little
act.
bit different.
It's a
It
bit-
is a
bit of
balancing
balance.
act, and utilities are more fair because they include hospitals, churches,
Yeah, okay.
schools. If you just put it on the general fund, it's only your taxpayer. It excludes all those who don't pay taxes, and frankly, all
So
those
it
things we
includes
just.
all the nonprofit organizations as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It is a more fair way to address it because you think about the parking lots even, and then parking lots aren't the only source, but
Well, you know,
all
we
of those
talk, you know, they're
nonprofits.
now measuring
Okay, so,
rooftops.
so,
yeah.
to
I
me,
mean,
if you
you're taking
had,
rooftops now.
if you had a new project, let's say that you come up with a plan and you were going to do a new project, then the utility plan is kind of a no-brainer, because as Al said, it rains on everybody and we're dealing with them. But how do you explain to a taxpayer where this piece of land is developed for a group of homes, let's use 20 homes, and in that plan, development plan, is a stormwater plan with a retention pond that is dedicated to those 20 homes. And we're going to repair that system. When, if you look at how they were permitted, if they agreed to the responsibility of that system, they agreed to the upkeep of that system, and it's all geared to do it. That may not have happened. So how do you explain to the taxpayer that we're going to pick up their problem? It's not a new project, because I think a new project, that's easy to do. But like in the case of Tanglewood, you say, why is the guy on French Hill chipping in when they developed that and they all agreed to maintain that system?
You explained it better than I did, but that's what I was trying to say.
I know you were, yeah.
Yeah.
in most cases, those neighborhoods have no idea. Now, Tanglewood's a bad example because they're a homeowners association and they have knowledge of it. But say if it was a regular neighborhood, developer came in, built the 20 homes, got the permit, constructed the permit, and is now living in Florida, other than the ponds behind Joe's house, nobody has any clue who put it in or why.
That's wrong, Ned, because I'll tell you why. It's like saying I don't have a clue on what's here in this vault. Because once it goes into the vault, the deeds and those association records are called public records, and you cannot plead ignorance to not knowing that it's filed. And all those stormwater permits are filed. When someone buys a home, those have to be disclosed to them by law, and they sign on the association. So guys, of course, they say, "Oh, I don't know anything about." You say, "Well, you sign, what's your signature here?" If you find that the association is formed, it's put into the public records, the stormwater permit is part of that. It's in their deeds, and many times, and it's so they can't really say. I mean, they do say, "I didn't know," but in reality, they legally do know, and they probably do know.
So Sam, what
I
would you
would
suggest?
certainly.
I'm saying is that we have it's a balance in that, because you're saying that public funds
I know
are
that
going
part.
to go in to alleviate a private problem.
Something that was been neglected.
There's something been neglected.
Right. I don't care about the future.
Right. But if it says, okay, can we go and enlarge your pond because we're going to use your pond to serve the greater good?
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. Okay. Or else we're going to. In fact, a few years ago we were going to try to get a grant for, and I was involved in that for stormwater retention up by 104. We were going to do a general service pond, which would, once we all came together and built it, then development would use it, but it would already be done, and it would be for part of the greater plan. That's pretty easy to do because, like you say, it rains on everybody, and it's all part of the future plan. But when you go into existing ones, you're going to get pushback from people that said, we're cleaning up somebody else's mess.
But that's why
No
we were
doubt.
basically using staff time, like our time, some in-kind services, and grant funds. The balance would be the homeowners association. We're actively saying, you have some responsibility here, you have to pay.
Well,
So
like in
that-
some cases, a pretty good deal that
It is.
they probably are responsible and they're getting help to do it.
Right.
They are.
And maybe that would be a sell that you could do, that you could convince that association, which probably has a problem and has an
I mean-
expense, and you're picking it up.
Right.
But ever since we started doing this and it came through the planning commission and all that, it has always been, the elephant in the room has been funding. It always has been, how
That's
do
right.
we get that money?
Right.
And how does, everybody, it's like everybody talks about renewable energy. That's such a wonderful thing. As long as you don't put the windmills on the hill and we can't see the solar panels, I love it. It's great. But just I don't want to see it, And that's kind of like this. No, stormwater's great.
Works
till
for
you
me,
come
but
knock
not
on
in my
door.
backyard.
Yeah.
Until you knock on my door and ask for a check.
Yeah.
So
But I think that's why we're coming to the select board first, because we need, you take the time to read the paper, you understand the papers we give you, and I'm hoping that if constituents have a problem with one smaller project or maybe bigger one,
Yeah.
they'll come to you or come to us and say, this is why I don't understand what we're doing. But we need to understand that the bigger picture is, we've said we're gonna move forward and do this with minimal expense on behalf of the town, and we're
Yeah.
hoping we're all on the same
Yeah.
page.
It all sounds good to me, except for the uncertainties of the 50/50.
Yeah, and that is going to play out literally every project. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. You're going to hear, I'm sure,
Yeah,
you'll
but
get,
if we don't get it, it could be a financial nightmare.
oh, it could,
Well, I'm thinking this money here, these projects, it's all infrastructure. That's what's been going through my head. We're building something. It's something that everybody's using.
Yeah.
So why can't, I know
I know
some-
where you're going with that, yeah.
if somebody sent me a bill saying you're paying into a stormwater utility, I'd say, they got $2.5 million sitting up there in an infrastructure fund. Why can't they use that instead of sending me a new bill? That should be a part of the conversation too. Does the LOT fund or the infrastructure fund play a part in funding this stormwater issue instead of adding an additional utility burden?
Well, I
Because
the
that's
downside to that, Brendan, is that, and right or wrong, I've always felt that LOT should be used for investment infrastructure.
Something
that-
that'll grow.
Right,
Yeah.
and I understand the need for stormwater, and I don't know if I'm 100% convinced that the effect will be there, and I think Al will agree with me on that, and I don't think experts know the effect will be there. But that won't bring us the return. I mean, that won't bring the same as like putting in sewer lines, water lines, building streets, building.
The only return on investment is possibly a lower phosphorus rate.
Yeah,
Like-
and possibly generations from
Oh,
now they'll
right.
thank us.
I don't think tonight we're gonna solve it. We're
No,
already
we gotta be
45 minutes into it,
moving
but
along.
what we're asking tonight is for some consensus on the path we're currently taking. So, you know, the state's looking at utilities, the town can look at a utility. We don't know whether that's gonna come to fruition or not, but we do know that in the next 12 months, we're gonna continue on with these projects that we believe between state, federal grants and the local in-kind match, we can show some success with minimal expense. It's not free though.
Okay.
Just want you guys to know that.
See,
Do you
and then-
have a-
And then you use the local in-kind match. That's another, non-guaranteed match.
Correct.
Absolutely. We're doing this project by project. In no way are we saying,
But I
gosh,
think
if you
that-
say yes, we're good to go for the next 50
I
projects.
think
I mean,
what
we're
you
not saying.
presented to us tonight, to me, looks good, sounds good.
Have you
There are
put together a
there are
timeline of funding?
uncertainties in everything we do.
No, what I'm saying is, okay, so let's say from now, today, and you're moving forward, okay, 6 months is going to be X amount of dollars, and then 12 months is going to be, so that you know what the possibility of financial burden or need is.
Yes, we could, using the flow restoration plans. I would suggest against that and doing it as sort of similar to what Brendan says, is sort of smooth it out, do a general collection year by year by year, and sort of build up the build and drain, build and drain, build and drain sort of a thing. Because some of them are, some years we're going to get lucky. We're going to have a couple of cheap, easy ones. We'll send the guys over, they'll dig it out, we'll be done. A couple of grand later, we're good to go. Other ones, like sort of the NMC and Tanglewoods and sort of the industrial park, are going to be the tough ones that are going to take a year or two to construct and going to cost a
So
fair
then,
amount of money.
that's what I'm saying is, they'll say that's going to, the MC one is going to happen 2 years from now, 3 years from now, then you say, okay, we can anticipate a $500,000 need or something like that in 3 years. You know, in 2 years, it's going to be X amount of dollars, just so that you,
Do you have a price tag on your projects?
that's what I'm asking.
$5 million.
On the ones we just talked about that we got grants for,
Oh, they're like, it's 250, 300, something like that. I don't even remember off the top of my
that's the
head.
total of all the projects.
All four,
And
yeah.
then this,
Worst case scenario, 300,000.
Oh, no, less than that.
oh no, we're saying, like, I thought you were saying 250 for everything. The grants covered at least half
Oh,
that,
yeah.
so we're at 125 with in-kind matches. We're less than the 100,000 we already have in this year's budget, is basically gross numbers is what we're
Brainer to me
thinking.
then.
And we're taking care of
But
almost
that's-
10%
And we're
of our.
taking care of those, yeah.
But that's 4 or 5 communities, and
Yeah.
that's just a gross, I mean,
It's a hell of a good
Yeah, no,
start.
and actually, those are over
You-
estimates. It's actually
Yeah, they're
probably
pretty
more in
high.
the, in the
It's a good start.
50.
You figure where the town was 2 years ago with stormwater management versus where we are today. It's
Yeah.
a testament to our staff and our ability to move in the right direction.
Yeah. So what is the bottom line? What are you really looking for right tonight from us?
just consensus that, and we want you to understand where we're at, because I don't want in a year or two, as this progresses, for people to be shocked that
No?
we went from,
I
you know,
think-
like mildly talking about an idea to actually physically doing
I
something.
think you did an excellent job as to
Okay.
where we are right now.
Could you create a budget for us so that we can follow it month to month as you spend out money? We know how much you have income from us, from federal government, from the taxpayers, and then how it's spent out to ameliorate a problem. So we got an idea that we're on track with the $100,000 that we've got in the budget.
Right.
And you're raising money.
I think
for
we
the
have
other-
more, by the way, because we put money aside before, but.
Okay.
I think that's what I was asking.
I would prefer,
Yeah,
I
I
would
think you
prefer that
were.
we don't do month to month, we do sort of
Well,
Project by
quarterly.
budget season and sort of end of construction season. I know they're not going to end up 6 months apart because we'll sort of know January, February time what we should be doing that construction season. We would know somewhere this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier, what we got done and what we would, we'd be setting up the next ones for next year. Because the in-between is, how much we pay the construction people and back and forth is going to end up, I think, taking a lot of staff time that's sort of needless, but I think we should see the fund is, the fund ended up here at the end of the season. The next season is here. We didn't get this stuff done. We need to.
You have to do reports twice a year anyway
Yeah.
to the state, so
So,
we can definitely do them
just
at
get a
copy.
minimum twice a year.
Al,
to
what's
the
your
state.
idea, what's your feelings on them proceeding and taking the path they're taking right now?
Well, I understand it, but from my point of view, you know what you're going to send out bids,
Right.
get that, so you know what your costs are going to be long before they
Oh, yeah.
You gotta
shovels
have
hit the
a
ground.
budget.
Right.
Yes.
Huh?
You're going to know what your in-house labor costs are.
Correct.
So I don't see why it's so hard to create a budget
You gotta have a budget.
An
Any job
expense.
you do, you've got a budget.
to tell us, you don't have to do it monthly, but certainly quarterly. Because what I don't want is, and I assume the select board will agree with me, we don't want to come back a year from now and say, oh my God,
What'd you spend and how come you did
Yeah,
that?
so
Yeah.
I'd rather, if you have a problem, I'd like to know
Well,
about
that
it when it
in-kind match,
happens.
was it really that kind?
But if
Wasn't
you're-
kind at all?
Let's say that your projects are 25, 50, 100. That, I don't try to sound light on that kind of money, but
Right.
Right.
that's one thing. It's all, okay, well, we thought it was 50, it was 75, and maybe better next year. But if you're saying that it's going to be 100, 250, 300, we have to have, you got to have a plan. We got to have a financial plan.
Yeah.
We got to know that 6 months from now, you're going to need 50,000, 9 months, you're going to need another 100.
Yeah.
I don't see that yet.
We are going to stagger
have
these
not.
out over years, so don't.
Yeah, over
That's what I'm
20.
saying. That's why I
Yeah.
wanted, that's
Yeah.
to me why I want a timeline of when this money, your need for money is going to, so
Yeah.
you anticipate, when that's going to happen.
Well, we have one. I mean, we have one now
Yeah.
because the full restoration plans were put on 20-year plans when
Yeah.
we had to submit them to the state. So we can show you that.
Yeah.
But we
That's
think that they're
satisfying.
gonna come back lower, that's all. So
And
don't,
have a
maybe-
schedule of events, schedule
yeah,
of projects.
absolutely.
So why don't you share that with us?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what your
It's-
schedule of projects are. I don't know, what's the first one you're going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? As far as a physical project, shovel in the ground, do something,
We
what's
have-
the first thing you're going to
The
do?
first one we would, it'll be two. It'll be Hawks Nest and Franklin Home-Health. And then, like, literally probably a month later, not us, but somebody will start doing Tanglewood.
We haven't decided because
I know
we-
Tanglewood what that is, but I don't know what Hawk's Nest is. I mean, but I know Tanglewood what
Yeah.
that, I
Hawks
looked at
Nest is
that.
more a cleanup, isn't it?
Yeah, those are.
it's around Franklin County Home Health,
Yeah.
and frankly, we got the grants final a week ago, so that's why we don't have a schedule for you, because you can't do anything until you get
No,
the
but
final
eventually we'll
grant.
have
Yeah.
something
We
scheduled.
will
Yeah.
absolutely
We need
have
a budget
something.
and schedule.
Yeah, we'll have well, actually, we have budgets for each of those individual
okay.
projects.
We do.
And we have a schedule for the 20 years in the
Got it.
flow restoration
I
plans.
think if we could get 2 and 3 years.
Oh, yeah,
that
Well,
would be
that's
good.
true too, right?
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, actually,
'Cause, you could decide, you say you got a 20-year plan, but 5 years later say, I'm doing something different. Then we'll change the plan.
well,
Well, my
I
feelings
try
are
not to do
with-
that.
With the budget and the schedule, you could proceed with what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing that is in part of the presentation here is, as Al said with the Bess Pierce thing in the paper today, the state's talking about essentially a statewide stormwater fee, tax, whatever they want to call it. We were thinking of a similar thing in ourselves,
Okay.
but as they go, not to be disparaging, but go through their just gyrations that they go through every legislative session, I'm slowly looking at what they're doing and saying, and slowly adapting and changing and putting in notes into my file to say, they said this, they said this, they said this, we're going to go, and just so we're protected at the end.
Yep.
So when we come out of the legislative session, we'll know and be able to come back to you and say, here's what we think we need to do.
So let's wrap this one up so we can get on to the next one. But I think it's safe to say that like I just got done saying, budget, schedule, proceed. We agree?
Yep.
Are you saying we're wrapping up with stormwater?
Yeah.
So we got these bullet points, are we gonna go over these bullet points, or have we already done that?
We've jumped around, but yes, we've essentially done it.
Yeah.
But I'll be
Well-
happy to go over them.
Well, one of the things I saw, and with me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th bullet point says, create a municipal stormwater utility.
Right.
Well, we haven't decided to create a municipal stormwater
And-
utility.
And I would say not to create one now until we get through this legislative session and see what goes on, and then be ready, if it's beneficial to the community, to create it quickly but have it ready to go, create it quickly, or continue to drag our feet. If we're at the end of the legislative session, as we were at this current or last current session, I would still see what's going on, see what they're saying, and potentially drag our feet another, couple of months, couple of years, whatever, just to keep ourselves protected.
Moving, but not moving so
Well,
fast.
yeah,
You
that
get
was
ahead of
ki-
everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
That was meant to just say, hey, we're going to need to do this, but
Yeah,
we
But
don't.
it says create, so I wanted to
You're right. It's a good
look
point.
into
but-
a study or whatever.
Yeah.
As a side note on that, they're talking about the Rugbrook Flow Restoration Plan and the Stevensbrook Flow Restoration Plan. That's our plan.
Those are ours. yeah.
Yes.
I got a notice from the state that there's a Stevensbrook offset project that they have fully funded. And what do you know about that?
There a new one?
Well, that's what I'm asking. I got a notice that they were no longer requiring funding for Stevensbrook
From
offset
you.
plan. The states had an offset.
I know that they were talking about doing a gravel wetland near exit 19, a significant sized
Yeah.
gravel wetland. I don't know if that's what they're talking about. We didn't get noticed on that
We
as
didn't
well, but
get-
we can look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Because the loop ramp, that's
The cloverleaf stuff.
yeah, one of them was going to be, I forget if it's northbound or southbound leg of it, but was going to essentially become one big retention pond. And they also have a series of ponds that come from basically the Georgia rest area down that long slope in the center median and crosses under and ends up in that, what would be that pond there.
Yeah, I didn't know if you'd heard anything.
We have
got a
not.
notice because they were asking for funding. They were asking for. I was doing a project. I have one that's kind of an old one, but they had asked me, had required a contribution, which I had not made, and then they sent me a notice saying I no longer had to contribute. So, which I was all right with. But
They might have gotten some
but
grants
they
too,
said
V-Trans.
they'd already funded it. So I just wondered if you'd heard anything.
The pot of money that they gave out in terms of giving out to towns, about 50% of it went to the V-Trans.
Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise
Maybe
me
that-
if
yeah.
V-Trans
Okay.
got, they had, and it wasn't just that, there was a number of things in that area where they were looking at.
Yeah.
Just, well, the home health agency was built in Ballpark Head. Need to track it back.
Okay.
Yeah. And Hawks Nest is owned by Jim Dusevich.
All right, let's move on to our next
Sidewalk.
item here. You're not off the hook yet.
No, I'm just going to move to the other side of the table. Stormwater on this side, got to put on the other
He
hat.
needs another throw lozenger.
Yeah.
This is gonna
That's
take
a-
a while, he says.
No,
I'm
it's,
one of them lemon things. I gotta buy a bag.
Where you buy these?
Tractor Supply.
Yeah, we got a lot of interesting candy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna buy a bunch of them and leave them here. That's good stuff.
they're at Ocean State Job Lot, they're a buck a bag.
Those are good.
And they're very good.
The lemon drops are hard to find these days.
That's good stuff.
Sidewalks, sorry.
Sorry. That was good.
So we may not need to spend a lot of time on this. I mean, just to frame it up, the planning commission, Brendan knows this, but has looked at this, made their final edits. They are ready for the select board to look at it. We're not asking you to approve it this evening because our attorney is still under legal review. So, but what we're asking for is, in general, is this concept and what it says in the content acceptable? Because once it does pass through legal review, we want to approve it. ordinances take a little time, as you know. And then, once this is secured, both through legal and the select board, Ned can work on the remaining portions of the sidewalk master plan. But this was most important because obviously people are coming in and we need to provide some direction to them, both about placement and standards, maintenance, all that, the big ones.
At one time, I think it was Brent agreed to put or asked to have the sidewalk plan
Yep.
posted here, so that people could come
Wanted
in
the
and
map.
look at it.
Yeah. Just haven't had time to edit it and put it up there.
Okay.
There was a couple things on it that he wanted to revise to avoid confusion, because I think it's worth noting, because I kind of missed it the first time I read it, that these things are suggestions on the road, and in the map, it shows both sides of the road, which does not mean that we intend to require sidewalks on
Both
both sides of the
yeah.
road, that we might pick one side or the other.
Or maybe not a sidewalk, a multi-use
Right,
path.
so-
we were gonna do shading on the road, just to say, here are the sections of road we're gonna do, where it's gonna be.
Hey, has anybody seen Colchester's new town sign? I think that thing is great,
Colchester, I mean.
The new logo?
In
Yeah.
town? Oh,
Yeah.
the logo, yeah, I've seen the logo.
with the walking, the biking,
Yeah.
and the boating.
Yeah.
Bright yellow.
That thing is so neat.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. That's what people are looking for in communities now.
They are looking for those type of facilities,
Yeah.
so, but it's worth noting before we make the sign and put it on the wall, that he's trying to finalize those things.
Yeah.
We haven't forgotten about it, but this is part of the method to our madness here is to get this approved in most of it anyway, and then, once
One
legal.
thing I always wanted to add, not to interrupt Carrie, I just want to say before I forget. Under 5, the last page, go to the back. I thought under 5.3, and I never brought it back up after we talked about it. Somebody might have already had a good reason, but
Removal of snow from sidewalks?
yeah, what if you're disabled?
Then
Should
you have
there
to,
be-
then you have to hire someone.
Yeah.
If it's your property and you develop it and put something in there, and you can't maintain your property, then you have to hire someone to maintain the property.
What if you're elderly, low income, and disabled, and you can't afford to hire somebody?
If you're elderly, my opinion would be if you're elderly, low income, you probably can't afford the home, really.
If you own it, and then you get income sensitized
I
taxes.
hear where he's coming from. There
Yeah.
are people like that have paid their homes off and no longer have income coming in and can barely pay the property taxes. And they're not mobile.
No, they have income sensitized property taxes, no mortgages. And
Correct.
they just pay their utilities and they're done. I mean, they can do that off of their social security, but they're otherwise strapped. That's what I'm
Look at-
thinking.
At what point does the town maintain sidewalks? In this ordinance?
At no point in this
Never.
ordinance do
But-
we.
Well, we had this discussion,
We did.
Yeah.
and I'm totally opposed to forcing homeowners to do sidewalks. Because Ned gets up at 7, he does his sidewalk. Brendan gets up he works at IBM, he's on the 3rd shift, he gets up at 1, he does his, but they're neighbors. So you can walk across Ned, you can't, so you're gonna tell Brendan he's gotta get up at 7 to match Ned, so they get this all cleared? I said right at the onset that if the town is gonna mandate sidewalks, the town has to come up with a sidewalk maintenance policy, and the sidewalk should be in the town right away, not on private property.
I agree
Right.
100%.
In 99% of the cases, and the town should have a maintenance, because making the homeowner do it will not work. It'll never work. We're gonna be in court. Somebody's gonna go out and say, you made me do it, and I slipped, broke my hip, and it's just not gonna work. And so I was opposed to that. I see the value of sidewalks and pedestrian walkways and stuff, but they must be in the road right away, and the town must be committed to
What if
taking
we-
these over.
What if
I
we said
think
we
you-
just wouldn't maintain
You
them?
couldn't have put it any better, Sam.
Well, I
agree.
mean, I think you can have a hybrid. I mean, Williston to me is an example. I borrowed their plan where they have like 34 miles of sidewalk, and they say for the arteries, they will provide maintenance, and including winter maintenance. And if you choose, if you're on something, community that isn't getting winter maintenance, and you want to petition the board, then you can petition the town and say, I'd like you to maintain this sidewalk as well.
But
So,
that's all well and good, if the
Yeah.
town says, I'm gonna maintain it, but if the ones they decide not to maintain,
You
then
can't
they don't get
maintain it.
maintained.
Right.
But
That's
to
right.
say to the homeowners, you must go out there and shovel your sidewalk, I don't care if you're 70, I
Yep.
don't care, and I don't care where you work, I don't care your circumstances, you gotta get out there, I want it done, I'd like it done early in the morning. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's unrealistic, so, it's kinda like, in our projects that I get involved in, the sidewalks, we prioritize which sidewalks will get the maintenance and which ones won't.
Right.
And your
Yep.
front sidewalk might get it, and your back one might
Yeah,
not, or
right.
your back one gets it, and your front one doesn't. But, so if we have this sidewalk plan, and we decide that it's important that the sidewalk from North Main to, the shopping center must be, then we put in equipment, we
Yeah.
commit to it. If we decide there's a sidewalk that comes from the schools to the Collins Pearly, we commit to it, and we maintain it. If we say to a development, you must, and again, we mandated into commercial areas or in our growth center, we didn't mandate in the other developments, but if you put them in, you guys deal with them, but we're not going to regulate that.
I don't think we should be telling a person they got 48 hours to clean the snow out from the sidewalk. of their
But,
home.
so I think that's going to be a problem, so, and I really think it's important that the sidewalks become into our right-of-way.
And my assumption is, if it's a sidewalk and we're charging somebody for whichever way it runs, they will be in the public right of way, all of them in the
And
public
we,
right
and
of
we
way.
take the road, at some point, we're taking the road,
And the
we're
sidewalk.
taking the sidewalks,
Yep.
we're taking that utility corridor.
Right.
We
And
want to
all-
know, we want to say,
Yes.
okay, you're going to put the water line here, you're going to put the sewer line here, you're going to put the utilities here, your sidewalk's going to be here. We don't want to dig the sidewalk up when we have to work on the sewer.
Right.
We want, and that's just good planning, but we want it in that 60-foot right-of-way.
Correct.
But to me, the ones that we want maintained are the ones that are not. And I was coming to my next question is because I don't see anything about the designated growth center mandated ones here. But the ones that we want maintenance are the ones that we're going to be, I think are going to be, would be public sidewalks, where we're going to say, okay, we're not going to do these little segments. We're going to build one from Collins to Hardack. We're going to build one from the schools to Collins. We're going to build one from the shopping centers. And those are going to be public, and we are going to maintain them. And we, as a community, will have to commit to maintaining them. And either we work with the city, with their equipment till we get ours, but we do commit to that. To having individual shovel is just crazy, just not gonna work.
In terms of the ones from, like, from Satec to, let's just say Satec to Collins Pearly, or Collins Pearly to Hardack, depending on how it's configured, we would end up maintaining it. If I would suggest that those we do maintain and we leave out of the sidewalks. Those, my assumption for those is they're going to be a multi-use path, be 8-10 feet wide, some sort of hard surface to it. The maintenance will be relatively straightforward. You put a full-size pickup truck out on, and you get it done.
Well, it's like you just telling in Milton they bought a little machine there, sidewalk machine.
Yeah.
The city has a couple.
Yeah.
We're going to mandate sidewalks. We got to have the equipment.
Yeah.
We got to follow
I
up.
have an
But-
industrial sidewalk.
Yeah.
But I think we should clearly define
Storage
sidewalks and multi-use, or let's just call them pathways, or,
Right.
the paths. The paths, yeah, guaranteed, we're going to do it, because they'll get used essentially 365 days a year.
So are we asking them to take out 5.3 A and B?
Oh, yeah. I just don't.
Yeah.
I just don't see it where it's going
Yeah.
to work.
Okay.
And if let's say that a development on Kellogg Road has a series of sidewalks, and they choose not to do winter maintenance, I don't think the town should jump in there and say you must maintain them.
Right.
So
But now, if
4 and
in our
5.
growth center, okay, as we put these sidewalks in, then we have to struggle because we're going to mandate them,
A and B.
and we should have a clear
Not for it.
definition of specifications of how we want to build. And in those cases, there may be a maintenance plan,
Right.
you know, and we,
Right.
because then we come with it. But the rest of them,
Yeah, I don't think we
Isn't it-
necessarily want to delete it, because there's things like Harborview right now, we don't maintain those sidewalks, and we would like someone to do it, and if someone failed to do it, I'd want something in an ordinance that would direct them.
to me, I have no appetite to force homeowners to go out and shovel their sidewalk.
Yep.
No, I
have
don't,
any
I,
appetite for
if
that.
we're saying that we don't want it, I don't leave it in here. What do we want to leave it in here for if we don't agree with it?
Because there's still some private sidewalks
Yeah.
out there that we are going to require them to,
Then
We haven't
we
taken
should
them over
mention
yet.
private sidewalks.
We have,
We have
we
taken it.
have.
well,
Well, we've taken over the road like
but it's
Harborview.
inside
Okay.
the road.
Right.
It is. It
So I think
is.
we
So it's
better-
ours.
We better start buying the equipment.
It's not ours.
Yeah.
It's actually not ours because it was in their permit that they would own and maintain that
He
sidewalk.
agreed to it.
It was a
when he took- when
condition-
he took the road over.
But I mean, it was a condition of their DRB approval that they would,
But just like we talked about earlier on stormwater, we said, who's the owner? And I'll tell you, when you say, I'm gonna take your road, your 60-foot road, and it's gonna be so many dimensions by this, by so long, and inside that is a sidewalk, whose sidewalk is it?
Yeah.
It's the town's.
Yeah.
Oh, if you're
You have
taking,
ownership now.
yeah, it's yours.
It's yours. And
Yeah.
if you say, geez, it's gonna be, because I've thought about that at Harborview. I said, God, if that thing gets icy,
Yeah, I know.
and one of those elderly go down, they're gonna, guess what? You may
So,
not think
let's
you've got a
be-
responsibility, but
let's be
your lawyer's
specific.
gonna think you've got a responsibility.
And say private sidewalks.
Yeah, no, we will edit it to say private sidewalks and maintenance per DRB decisions or other
Yeah.
there
board
might be
decisions.
something out there.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
there's verbiage I'm sure that the attorney can give us.
Yeah, I just don't wanna police it.
Yep.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's
Right.
gonna be.
No, that would be easier to manage and easier to explain,
Yeah, I wanna
and
be
it
careful
seems
on that.
fair, frankly.
Okay,
Is that a
anything else?
consensus then, hearing?
Pardon?
Consensus?
Yeah,
from-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I'd like to see on design and construction standards, it mentions the A76 standards for town and development roads, but I'd want that fleshed out. I would want someone to be able to pick this ordinance up and
And read
say,
it.
at least the basics. I want, minimum 5 feet, so on, because referring to another document, especially when, and that leads me to a question, is that I noticed the fresh sidewalk over by the hospital on 104.
Yeah.
That looks like 4 feet. And someone told me that the A76 standard was 5 feet.
I think I even said 5 feet. And I know I said I'd measure it. Yeah,
It looks like 4 feet,
I'll check it out.
It's a great job. It's a great looking sidewalk. But
It's too narrow.
if it was a recreation trail, it's small.
Oh, it's way too small.
And
It's a-
I looked at it and went, damn, wouldn't that be nice if it kept going and went over to Hardak? Because it started. What we thought what we wanted has started. And the next step would be to see if we could get through that set-aside land over to Hardak. I'd really like to see that, but certainly more than the 4 foot there. So I would, we can always add on to it, but at least it started. I think that's the first real chunk of sidewalk I've seen in the town.
Right.
It means something.
Yep.
Right,
It's not out
Yeah.
in a suburb. It means something.
yeah. But this is why, part of the reason why the map isn't there is we want to put them in as generically as possible, just so things like that where, initially it would, 4 foot sidewalk would have been seemingly enough. And now you look at it and think, it's
Right.
not enough.
Well, that section there, I see that could be if you connect it to Collins Purley to Hardak, with the expansion that's going on with Hardak and the usage that goes on at Collins Purley,
Yeah.
that your track team is going to start going. If you put a path in, you're going to bike and stuff,
Oh,
and it gets a little crowded on
Yeah.
that span. So
Yeah,
I would like to see the design
standards.
standard flushed out, and also if in the sidewalk plan that you say some of these are designated to be wider, more of a recreation path rather than just a pure sidewalk, that you add the language of what the design standard for building a leg of recreation path. So if someone is doing a development in a growth center that is between the Collins Purley, Hardak, the rail trail, wherever, that they make it whatever we decide, 6, 8 feet, and at least accommodate future use.
We will add it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
That's fine.
Got anything else?
Oh. Again, I think that there's not a lot in here about the mandated sidewalks. Is that?
In the
I mean,
growth center?
In the growth centers? This is more like generic sidewalk?
It is just everywhere else, but I'll add in
But I think
Franklin
that
Park West.
because in
just
the
growth
bylaws,
center.
you could say, well, I gotta have sidewalks, and, I'd like sidewalks on the Keller Road, but it's not mandated.
Right.
And I think it only says that you leave a right-of-way, or at least that was the intent, was that you plan for sidewalks in the 60-foot right-of-way, that you
Right.
put in a plan so that you're not putting your infrastructure that blocks the ability to have a sidewalk later on. I think that's the only thing requiring in your bylaws. So it would be great to have in this ordinance that, what do you say to a guy in a commercial, in the growth center? What's his plan for the sidewalk? Because he has to do it.
Right.
Where Handy's were, and where the hospital was, So there should be some language in there for that.
In terms of like the Kellogg Road locations, what's in the Unified Development Bylaws is more than sufficient, because we're not proposing any sidewalks along those roads. We have basically a gravel shoulder on those areas.
No, but not on the road, but if your guy does a development, let's say he
Off
gets,
Kellogg or
and
something.
he puts in a 60-foot road, then this should apply to him, because he has to, I would think anyway, maybe, somewhere he has to have in his approval that he has a plan for sidewalk, because that's what I thought was in the bylaws, that there was a plan for sidewalk. So he shows a 60-foot right of way. In there, the sidewalk's going to be on the right side, it's going to be, and so that nothing obstructs it for construction later on,
Right.
Okay.
right?
That's
Right.
that was my assumption in terms of the policy, is that would be covered in terms of the development approval process, assuming that they were developing to the town standards, the A76 standards.
In
But
here.
they're gonna refer to this, though.
No, actually, they would refer to Becky and the
Okay.
Unified Development Bylaws, because it wouldn't come to us until it was actually a town road
Okay.
and constructed.
So it would not go in here then?
That would be their own, if they wanted one on their, like, let's just say they put in 20 houses on a dead-end street. If they wanted a sidewalk, it was their deal, their thing. We may get stuck with, at some future date, maintaining it, and they obviously would construct it to the A76 standards, but it would be up to the DRB to decide where.
But if you look, let's say that you have a housing development that's off Kellogg Road, and looking out many years, there's a path that comes down from the city to the bay, and Kellogg Road, and this development is, let's say, 200, 300 feet off Kellogg Road, north. Then it seems to me you want that housing development to hook into the road, the path that goes from the city to the bay. So I don't think you can say we don't need them
We just don't require them right now.
at this point, but there's got to be
Right.
money set aside for, if they don't put the
Future.
development
plan.
into, sidewalk in the development, it should be set aside.
Right, and at some point in the future, let's just say a pile more development that happens along Kellogg Road, and something starts down Lake Road, we would obviously edit this at some point and
This page,
to
okay.
add that into that, or in terms of a development project, connecting the little side
Isn't that
things.
what we said we were gonna do, have the developers put money aside
Mhm.
until it was fully developed and sidewalks would actually connect instead of having
But
a sidewalk in front of one house?
that's in the designated growth
Growth
centers
centers.
where that occurs.
Right.
Okay, because they're mandated to put it in, and it makes sense to say, don't just put it in, because we don't,
Yeah,
we
just
don't
don't-
want
We
you to
don't
put it
need
in.
a
Right.
slab there and a
No,
slab here.
we
and a
want you to
slab.
give money, and then we'll put it in when it works for us.
Right.
Right, but if you go out where it's not mandated, I think the thought was just don't screw it up so we can't do it later.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's pretty much, I think.
Yeah, it is.
And actually, Becky and I have spoken about exactly that, about making sure things have some logic and some maintenance so they can dig it up simply and easily.
And I think is it Meadowbrook Lane? where they put the sewer line right down the middle of the street. Which, you know,
Is it?
in the cities, I think you get kind of stuck with that.
Right.
But if you can avoid it, in urban areas, you can, you know.
Except, I was a 3 sewer man in Brooklyn, which means we played stickball. And if you could hit the ball 3 sewers, it was a home run.
They
So
were in
you
the
liked
street.
it there?
Right.
They were in
Yeah.
the street.
All right.
Okay.
The only thing I have other than, so page 4, right above 4.2, there's a disclaimer about when you have to make your claim of exemption by to be exempt from the fees and whatnot. Can't think of a situation where that would come up because aren't the fees due at the time where you apply for a building permit? You'd figure it out right when you figure out what your impact fee is and you have to pay it to get the permit. And then also, even if it wasn't, so, I don't know, you get a partially destroyed structure, an alteration, an accessory dwelling, and a replacement of a mobile home. I mean, say you go get all these permits, you pay any type of, you wouldn't have an impact fee with anything except maybe the accessory dwelling, which would be about $800 and then at that point you'd probably be told about this fee anyway, and you'd be told you were exempt because you wouldn't have to pay it. So I just don't know if there's a reason that needs to be there, but I was racking my head for a couple minutes about trying to think about how that could ever get.
I
How
thought
that
it's
could-
just a mobile home thing that you were against.
No. Well, I would know about it because I'd be the one filling out the application for the building permit, and I'd be saying I'm exempt from this, this, and this, and I'm also exempt from the sidewalks.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be like, after when I'm going for my CO, they'll say, well, where's our sidewalk money? They'd be saying that when they were going for the building permit. But I don't know. If there's a reason that's there.
Come on, give him
it's-
the answer.
Becky and I have sat in her office and talked this through any number of times on like how screwball reasons on how somebody could avoid this, and we couldn't figure out ones.
But if you want to leave it just to have
I
something
would
in
say
there,
leave it just in case.
right? It's not like
the timing of it, in terms of the, it's a timing thing, not
right.
a type thing, and I'll have to look at the timing and think that through because we were thinking of screwball developments that somebody could avoid this and or come out like somebody who was like, let's just say they had a development on Lake Road, but they were going to come out through a different street just to avoid the sidewalk, and it was like, okay, we'll give you an exemption, just come out in a logical place and don't screw up the road system.
Would there be any merit to adding a 5 to 4-1, allowing a developer to petition either the select board or the DRB for a specific type of exemption from this?
We would be legally required to let them do that if they.
Should we just add it so somebody gets the idea, or do we not want anybody to know that they can do that?
This is going to be an ordinance. I
yeah.
don't know if you want to.
We should not. Go ahead.
No, I don't know.
I don't think we should give them the rules, all the rules or all the
You gotta-
ways they can
you'd have-
avoid it.
You'd have a,
Yeah.
I don't think you can do that with an ordinance. An ordinance is
The law.
it is a local law, and you can't put an out. You shouldn't put that.
I think
I just have a
even ordinances should be written in somewhat layman's language, so people understand it. So when you have the average Joe looking at this and saying provisions of Article 3 subdivision regulation.
Well, yeah, we don't want them to
article,
have to get a
you
lawyer.
know,
Yeah.
Holy smokes, I mean,
Well,
Don't want it to be
I-
really complicated.
any professional you had sitting upstairs would easily be able to tell somebody, yes, you're in, and here's why. No, you're not, and here's why. Because that's fairly standard verbiage for, yeah, you're in, no, you're not in, and yeah, you're in because of da-da-da-da-da-da. And I agree that it's thing, but you have to put in, for the
Yeah.
lawyers in there, you have to
Yeah.
put in exactly where, what,
They
and
can
how.
find it.
So I have a question on that, number 1 of the policy 4. Are you saying that you can't create a mother-in-law's apartment?
No, that's you. I will defer to Becky's, but I'm going to try to give you an answer. That means if you're putting in one of those, you wouldn't be required to or pay for a sidewalk.
So if you, let's
So
say,
it says-
that would that be a sidewalk that is the entire length of your property? You've got a half-acre lot, and you convert to a duplex, you're from a single family to a duplex, that you've got to pay for the frontage, so much a foot for your frontage into this sidewalk.
If for changing from a single family to a duplex, you would have to appear before the DRB, you would be paying that fee.
Now, a lot of this is geared towards the properties that are not in the growth centers. This is that $17 fee that you envisioned.
Right,
Have those.
Mostly growth centers are commercial,
yeah.
but these are situations where they're outside. So you're going to mandate that even though they don't have to put the sidewalk in, that they have to pay the fee for the sidewalk they don't have to put in.
Correct. They can either, they can choose, actually you gave 3 options, but there's really only 2. They can either pay or install. It's their
But
choice.
you haven't mandated they have to put it in, because they're else. We have mandated that the sidewalks must be put in the growth center.
Correct.
And what we said was, and we found is that, which we kind of knew, that we put the cart before the horse. We said, you must put the sidewalks in, and we didn't know what we wanted for sidewalks, we had no ordinance, we had no plan. So we said, well, we could help them out by asking them, don't just write us a check, and when we get our crap together, we'll put them in.
Right,
But we said that outside the growth center, you don't have to put them in. You just have to have a reasonable plan that works for us later on. So this says, you don't have to put them in. You have to have a reasonable plan to work for us later on. But we're going to assess you a fee like you had to put them in.
actually, I think it says, we'd prefer not to have and I have to check the wording. We'd prefer to install these all at one time, so there's a logical progression to the sidewalk, not disjointed little segments. And that, yes, you are required to install segments along
So
those.
you have to change your bylaws and say sidewalks are required everywhere.
They're not. It says that they're required along that 22 or 23 streets. I think it's 22
Wow.
streets.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then you got, so everywhere on those streets, even though they're not required in the bylaws, you've got all this assessment going on. That concerns much more assessment than on the $35 one, because I think the $35 one is pretty well cut and dry. We've
Right.
mandated it, we haven't got our plan, so we come up with the $35. I think those people, whatever, that area,
yeah.
can't argue with that. But a lot of this plan, the bulk of this plan is for the areas outside that growth
Right.
center. And we haven't mandated sidewalks in those areas.
Right. We've mandated,
But we're going to charge for them even though we haven't mandated them.
correct. No, we're not mandating sidewalks in those areas. We're mandating 3-foot, or I think it's 3-foot gravel shoulders on those roads. And they can install along the frontage, or they can pay us the $17.50 a linear foot. But I'll make sure that it's worded so that it says in.
But is that in the 3-foot gravel shoulder in the bylaws?
Probably should be.
It actually is, because it's the A76 standard.
In the 876 standard is 3-foot gravel shoulder?
Actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's actually 4 feet gravel shoulders. I'll have to check, but it's something like that.
I don't think so.
It does require gravel shoulders, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I don't think it's enough to accommodate a sidewalk.
It's not, because generally in the areas that are outside of the listed streets in the ordinance are low enough traffic volume, wide enough roads that most people would be walking on the pavement until a car came, then they'd walk on the gravel shoulder, and then they'd move back and forth.
Right. Where does the sidewalk go, the future sidewalk go on that gravel shoulder?
Given the zoning in most of those areas,
Never.
that's never going to happen.
So we're going to charge them $17, but it's never going to happen?
Sidewalk's never
$17
gonna
per
happen.
shoulder.
It's never going to be enough traffic volume or anything.
No, but if you
But
say
you
to
can't charge them if it ain't gonna happen.
No, the
not
shoulder's
charge-
gonna happen.
the shoulder's
That's why
gonna
it's
happen.
50, not
If you
35.
do a development in town and you say, I'm gonna do an A70, I'm gonna build my 60-foot road to 76 standards, and it's 2-foot gravel shoulders, or 3-foot, whatever it is, and so many feet of pavement, and so, you have the requirements, and you build it. That's nothing to do with sidewalks. That's A76 road standards. Road must be built to the A76 standards. You gotta build it regardless of whether you're doing any sidewalks at all.
Right.
So then you say, okay, I'm gonna charge you a fee for those shoulders. No, you had to do it anyways. And so,
You're talking about a new street?
yes.
Okay, this has nothing to do with new streets, only existing streets, only that list, nothing, or existing streets throughout the community at this time.
So, okay, so, all right, so that even confused me even more, and I apologize if I...
No, it's okay.
But, so, on these streets, and all these houses are built out, we're gonna come up with this whole plan of assessments of these houses that probably aren't gonna change in our lifetime. There's no money changing hands, and there's no sidewalks being built.
Exactly.
I think that's their point.
Yeah, that's the point. That's really,
It's
So if some poor sap
unlikely.
changes his house from a single, he pays for it, but it's never gonna happen.
it's gonna sit there for, let's just say it's an impact fee, it'll sit there for 6 or 7 years.
Can we use it, can we take his money, use it over in the growth center where we mandate it and come up
Well,
with a
I-
damn plan on it?
Yeah, I would say if it's somebody from Congress Street or like Fairfield or Fairfax, I would say,
I'm confused that we've got this whole ordinance on something that's not gonna happen, and we really
But
want
yet
an
we're
ordinance on
charging-
something that's gonna happen.
So you're proposing to get rid of that second bullet?
I'm saying is that the ordinance should pertain to more to the growth centers where we've mandated and less to the area outside that growth center. Because unless you're talking, which now you're clarifying for me,
Right.
unless you're talking about new development where they're actually going to have a chance to build sidewalks, and you're going into these existing places where there's very poor
Very
chance
little.
of sidewalks, we're wasting time on that.
but Act 250 would require them literally everywhere, like on
are doing that.
Look,
Beauregard.
Act 250 doesn't come in on all streets.
Yeah, it does. When Act 250 was ruling on whatever
Mill
was at the
River?
end of Mill River, they were going to force them to install a new sidewalk.
One single homeowner?
Well, in this case, it was a business.
A
but-
business, yeah. But I could imagine that was going to spread literally everywhere. I mean,
They
Paragraph.
would start, if you start, to me, if we're going into those existing homes and we start doing this, it's a can of worms. I mean, I don't know.
I agree. The can of worms is to avoid putting sidewalks in on like Beauregard, which has, nobody's going to use it. It's going to sit there and.
Well, I understand that,
Yeah.
I mean, the sidewalks that I think are,
But the-
that
but the-
that we must concern ourselves are in the growth center because where we're seeing more commercial stores and that, and a meeting, and the public ones, which I think the town should fund. I'm confused why we're doing this in the
Just,
areas where.
it's really to avoid some of the development in town having to do with sidewalks in Act 250 and us getting stuck with, like, well, Handy's is a bad example, it's in the growth center, but imagine Handy's on, up by exit 19. You'd have a sidewalk on 104 that'd be,
Right,
useless.
But we're going to cover that. That's in the growth center, and we're going to cover that handy thing.
Yeah.
But on some of these streets, the only time it's going to happen is when somebody does a conversion, if they ever do.
Exactly. However, and not like the conversions like the one on Beauregard, when Act 250 gets involved, they're going to mandate it. If we haven't said we are only installing sidewalks.
But Beauregard was an Act 250 existing project. There's no
Correct.
I know went in as an Act 250. But if you go out onto some of these streets, Parsons Avenue and Fairfax Street, those aren't Act 250.
Correct. And some of those, like on South Main Street, the Fairfax down there, that's built out.
Right. So I'm saying is that so you
I agree.
you got a whole ordinance to govern something that's not going to happen, very rarely happens, and then when it does, the guy that gets caught doing it isn't going to be happy.
Right, but if we don't have this, Act 250, for every little ruling they have, is going to have, 10,000 little tiny bits of sidewalk everywhere.
So this ordinance wouldn't pertain to, let's say, because if someone was out on, we've been using Kellogg Road,
Yeah,
and put in a 15-lot subdivision, this ordinance wouldn't pertain to him? he could put it in, meet the bylaw where he's got a 60-foot right-of-way with a plan for a sidewalk.
Right,
He reserved a right-of-way for sidewalk somewhere
right.
in that project. He doesn't have to pay the $17?
He doesn't have to pay, he would pay the $17.50 on the frontage of Kellogg Road. Let's just say he had 500 feet, 500 times.
Kellogg Road is mentioned on this? in your-
Yeah, Kellogg Road is, because it's outside of, it's not listed, it's the 1750, it's every other
Every other place is
in
separate.
town, except for the ones that are
He
listed.
doesn't pay for the interiors?
No, just the front, like, let's just say he had 500 feet of frontage on Kellogg Road. He'd pay 500 times 1750, and that would be it. He'd be done. And anything internal would be, where my assumption would be low enough traffic volume, he'd either installed it because Becky and the DRB had told him to, or it'd be wide enough and low enough volume that it wouldn't make a darn bit of difference either way. And be so little used because, 20 houses it's just not, I mean, like 20 houses, nobody's going to walk to the Hannaford's from there. It's just,
No, the children will
Let me,
play.
well, children will play, but
Yeah.
20 houses
Well,
is,
he can choose to do the sidewalks. We're just,
Right. We're not
you're
gonna manage
just
it.
not making him pay into the fund. He's only gonna pay on the municipal highway.
correct.
Right.
For the
That's
shoulder.
it. No
Is that clarified in here? Because it sure didn't work. I need to
The long
Yes.
way around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yes,
getting it down.
I thought it was clear, but yeah, we will make sure that it's clear because it's only on that list.
Public road.
So if a guy
Okay.
has a 50 foot, let's say he has 60 foot on Kellogg Road, he's gonna pay 60 times 17.
1750, and there he's going to, and that's going to be it.
Al, what time do you have to leave?
7:15.
Oh,
5
man, I
minutes.
wanted you in executive session with us, but
I really wanted to participate in that too.
Why don't we come back at another time?
well, he's got to leave in 6 minutes.
So do you want to go into executive session now?
Could we?
We can.
Yeah, you can.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
Just suspend our
I'll make a
sidewalk.
motion
Yes,
that, blah, 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 you know, the.
Yes, I do.
Go into
Camera on
executive session.
Get a camera.
and I'll
premature public
go along with blah,
disclosure
blah,
of
blah.
subject
Yeah.
matter,
Okay.
we'll put the public in it.
And we can't have that on anymore.
I,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.